Thank you, Alicia, for the introduction. I want to thank Alicia, Ted, and the rest of the team for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to be here. So I will be talking about breeding for more environmentally friendly dairy cows. And let me see if I know how to use this. There you go. So I will start with sustainability, right? I like this definition that sustainability is all about meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And in this current view or modern view of sustainability, we have these three domains, right? The economic, the social, and the environment. And when we think about farming, we have our own challenges, right? Related with profit, productivity, animal welfare, food safety, and of course, the environmental impact, right? Water quality, soil quality, climate impact. Now, when we think about sustainable dairy farming and we have our dairy cow in the middle, we would like to have high producing cows, so we can produce the same amount of milk using less number of cows. We would like to have very fertile cows. Fertility is one of the major drivers of dairy farm profitability. We would like to have long-lived, healthy cows, so we don't need to use pharmacological interventions and we don't mess up with animal welfare. And of course, we would like to have feed-efficient cows. We would like to produce the same amount of milk using less feed. We would like to have low methane emissions cows, produce the same amount of milk, emitting less methane. And of course, we would like to have resilient cows. Resilience is this idea of if we have a group of cows and we expose those cows to an environmental perturbation, the cows will not react in the same way to the same perturbation. So if we can measure how cows respond to a given perturbation, we can find more resilient cows. My group has been working in most of these traits. Because of time and because of the focus of this symposium, I will focus today on methane emissions and a little bit about efficiency, okay? Why methane? All of you guys are well aware of the importance of methane. I just want to emphasize that methane has a much more warming power than CO2, and at the same time has a shorter atmospheric lifetime than CO2. So reducing methane emissions is the fastest way that we have to either slow down or even reverse the rate of global warming. The second one is why methane and livestock, right? So you are all well aware that enteric fermentation accounts roughly for 27% of methane emissions in this country. And this is a quite unique opportunity for both the dairy industry and the beef industry to reduce methane emissions and in that way convert climate impact on social benefits with all the positive consequences of doing that. Now, beyond the impact of methane on climate change and global warming, methane is energy loss. And this is a very simple scheme of the flow of energy in a dairy cow. And if you start with gross energy here, you can see that methane energy represents between 5 and 10% of energy lost, energy that otherwise could be used for production and growth. So there are multiple benefits of reducing methane emissions in dairy cattle, including reducing the environmental impact of farming, but also improving production efficiency. There are typically 3 mitigation strategies, right? We can manipulate the diet of the animals, we can try to intervene the microbiome, and we can use selective breeding. Before I touch on all of this, I want to briefly revisit this paper. This is a paper was published a few years ago in PNAS. This is the proceeding of the National Academy of Science. It's a meta-analysis. These authors evaluate 430 different studies, almost 100 different mitigations options, including management, diet formulation, and rumen manipulation. What are the most important results of this massive meta-analysis, right? the vast majority of the options that we have available, they don't work. And there are only 8 options that can reduce methane without impacting performance. Overall, we still have many challenges in identifying effective strategies, and we need to remember that whatever strategy we decided to develop and deploy, that strategy needs to meet both the farmer needs and the consumer demands. The farmer needs cheap, easy to implement strategies. The consumers demand for high quality food from happy cows, healthy cows. So I'm a geneticist, right? So I will start with my favorite strategy, that is selective breeding. And I think this is a good question for this type of audience. How important is genetic selection? And I will answer that question using data from the US Holstein population. You can see here the change in milk production in the last 60 years. Easy to see there has been a tremendous increase in milk production per cow per lactation in this country. The cow today, she produces more than twice as much milk of a cow of 60 years ago, and 60% of that change is due to genetic selection. Contrary to the changes that we can do in management, in cow comfort, the changes that we can achieve through genetic selection have 3 unique properties. They are permanent, they are cumulative, and they are incremental. And Matt talked about this today. Genetic selection is probably the most cost-effective strategy that we have to reduce environmental impact. These are the traits that we have under selection in this country. This is a table from the Council on Dairy Cattle Breeding. You see we select for production, cow fertility, longevity, health, even calving ability, sun conformation, and feed efficiency. And methane? Not yet. If a farmer today wants to breed cows for low methane emissions, we do not have the tools yet. But we are working on it. My team is working on developing a national genetic evaluation for methane emissions. We are phenotyping using the green feed system. We do that in our research farms, and we do that on our commercial farms. We have developed this package. It's called Green Feed R. You see how creative we are with names in my team. This is a package to actually download, process, massage, and report green feed data. So you are aware these systems, they can generate a lot of data. So we developed this tool. It's in R, so it's open to everybody. It's free to actually use the data generated by the green feed system. What about traits? One of the beauties of the green feed is that you get grams per day. Now, there are other definitions there. They are common, like methane yield or methane intensity. Those two are ratio traits. Ratio traits, they have terrible statistical properties, and we are not using any of these ratio traits. But we know we need to adjust methane, right? So we are using residual methane traits. And we are using 2 different residual methane traits. One is residual methane intensity, where we have methane as a response variable, and we adjust methane for milk energy. Milk energy is a function of milk production and composition and metabolic body weight. And we have another one that we call residual methane yield, where we have methane and we adjust methane for dry matter intake. So why we have 2 residual methane traits? One is that milk energy, metabolic body weight, and dry matter intake are highly correlated. So if you fit a model with these 3 variables as predictors, you will have a multicollinearity issue, so probably you will be messing up the data. The second one is milk energy and metabolic body weight are 2 traits that we are measuring in commercial farms. So residual methane intensity can be measured on commercial farms, while methane yield is a trait that we are measuring on research farms. Here we go. This is a pen of 64 cows in one of our research farms. Same place, same pen, exactly the same diet. A Holstein cow, these are second lactation Holstein cows. They produce on average 450 grams of methane per day. These cows were exposed to 2 green feed units for 8 weeks. So that's why for each cow you have kind of a box plot measuring the variability. You see here 450 grams of methane, but in the same place, same time, same diet, we have cows that produce 650 grams of methane, and we have cows that produce 300 grams of methane. Beautiful variation in methane emissions in the Holstein population. Geneticists will love variation because genetic progress depends on having variation. These are the residual methane trait for the same group of cows. You see that these two traits are highly correlated. Here I have what I call residual methane intensity, methane adjusted for milk energy and metabolic body weight. In the y-axis, I have methane adjusted for dry matter intake. Here I have the cows that are producing 50, 100, 150 grams of methane more than they should based on their production level, metabolic body weight, and dry matter intake. And here I have my environmentally friendly cows. These are cows that are producing 50, 100, 150 grams of methane less than they should if you consider their production, metabolic body weight, and dry matter intake. So are these methane traits heritable, right? Heritability sets the pace of genetic progress, so that's why it's a very relevant parameter. Here I'm using data for daily methane. I have daily milk energy, body weight, and I have intake in roughly 80% of these cows. This is data from 12 different farms, research and commercial farms. In this analysis, we used 3,500 cows. We are approaching the 4,000 cows. So you can see here, methane production is heritable with a heritability of almost 30%. Just some context, milk production has a heritability of 20%, and we have been able to double milk production in the last 60 years, and 60% of that change is due to genetic progress. So imagine how fast we can move forward with a trait that has a heritability of 30%. Residual traits, nothing new here. Residual traits should have a heritability lower than the original trait because are residuals, but they have a very decent heritability around 20%. And here we have residual feed intake. We have been working in residual feed intake for the last 5, 6, 7 years. The residual feed intake has a heritability of 18%. That's exactly what we want. We use this trait as a marker of good performance of our analysis. Are the methane traits correlated? As you can see here, the two residual methane traits here, the two residual methane traits are highly correlated. Those are beautiful news because that means we can use information from commercial farms to inform the data that we generate on the research farm. But probably the most important finding so far is this correlation. There is a positive, large genetic correlation between methane production and residual feed intake. That means cows that tend to produce more methane tend to have positive residual feed intake values. That means tend to be less feed efficient. In other words, cows that produce less methane tend to be more feed efficient. That means in the near future we will have two sustainable traits, methane emissions and feed efficiency. They are both favorably correlated, so we will be able to push both traits in the same direction faster. Can we speed up the process? So we have a collaboration with Genus ABS and Urus Peak Genetics where we are phenotyping Holstein bulls. We are doing that during 3 weeks, and we do when the bulls have between 5 and 6 months old. Both ABS and Peak Genetics, they have their bull facilities in Wisconsin. Our long-term goal, it couldn't be too long, so I need to answer this fast, is what's the genetic correlation between methane emissions in a young bull and methane emissions in a lactating dairy cow? In other words, what is the genetic correlation between emissions in a bull and the emissions in the daughters of that bull? If that correlation is large, this will be a game changer, believe me. In this country, we have 9 million dairy cows, but we screen only 2,000, 3,000 bulls per year. It will be much easier to phenotype bulls that phenotypes the daughters of the bulls. So I brought some result. This is preliminary data, methane emissions in 150 Holstein bulls. A Holstein bull between 5 and 6 months produce on average 130 grams of methane. But look at this, beautiful variation. We have some Holstein bulls that produce almost 200 grams of methane per day, and we have some Holstein bulls that produce less than 100 grams of methane per day. When we adjust methane for average daily gain and body weight, residual methane, we have bulls that produce more than 20 grams of methane per day, more than they should, and we have our environmentally friendly young bulls here. They are producing 20 grams or 30 grams of methane less than they should when we account for average daily gain and metabolic body weight. Again, these are preliminary results, but this plot is fantastic. So this is a correlation between the methane emissions of the bull and the genetic merit of that bull, right? Look at this. Bulls that tend to produce more methane tend to have daughters that will produce more fat and protein. No surprise there, especially because the connection between fat yield and the microbiome. But look at this. This is fantastic. Bulls that tend to produce more methane tend to have daughters with positive RFI values and negative feed-safe values. In other words, bulls that tend to produce more methane tend to have daughters that are less feed efficient. And that is in agreement with the correlation that I mentioned before, that methane emissions and feed efficiency in dairy cattle, at least, thanks God, they are favorably correlated, and we will be able to push both traits faster. This cake is a kind of a diagram of what we are doing in terms of methane emissions. I already mentioned genetic solutions. I won't have time to talk about nutritional solutions. Licia, you need to invite me next year, and I will talk about G by E. We are working in genotype by diet interactions. Very cool question. What's the relationship between cow emissions and the manure emissions? And the third one, what about diet digestibility? If we select for methane, we will impact the ability of the cow to digest fiber. But today, I will be talking about very shortly about what we are doing in terms of spectra-based solutions and microbial solutions. One of the problems that we have today is if we go to a farm this afternoon, we walk together in a pen, and you ask me, Francisco, what are the cows that are producing more methane here? I would say, I don't know. This is real data, one of our trials, 32 cows. These are all second lactation cows. Look at this, beautiful variation. The Holstein cow produced 450 grams of methane. Same place, same diet, same conditions, same pen. You have cows that are producing more than 600 grams of methane. You have some cows that are producing less than 300 grams of methane. So when we think about precision feeding, the use of feed additives, first we will need to recognize, to identify the cows that are producing more methane. Do we have the tools to do that? Not yet, but my team is working on it. One approach that we are using is using the milk spectra. So this is data where we have methane production, milk energy, body weight, spectra, and genomics. Let me explain this a little bit. So when you are trying to predict, the best way to measure prediction ability is in cross-validation, where you train the model in a set of data, and you measure your prediction ability in another set of data, okay? The second one is, given the structure of our data set, there are different ways to randomize the animals to the different folds. One is to do it cow independent. You just randomize cows. If you do that, you are kind of overperforming. We know it because a cow that is training the model is in the same pen that's a cow that you are trying to predict. They are friends. So you are actually overperforming there. Another way is to do trial independent. Because we generate our data in trials, you train the model with some trials, and you try to predict a new trial. The third one, the real one, extremely challenging, is to do farm independent. That means you train the model with 11 farms, and then you go and you predict in the 12th farm that you didn't use that data to train the model. There we go. So we are using very simple predictors here that we can get in every farm. Daisy milk production, and metabolic body weight. And you see here, focusing trial independent and farm independent, I'm measuring predictive correlation in cross-validation. Those variables, they have some predictive power. You can have predictive correlations of roughly 30-35%. As soon as you incorporate spectra to that model, you boost the prediction ability to 30% to 60%. Beautiful result. And when you include genomics to that model, you know what? You get almost the same result than before. And we are working on this. There are probably two ways to explain this result. First is that actually the spectra is heritable. That means the spectra here is already capturing some of the genetic effects. And the second one is that probably our data set, we are working here with 3,500 cows, is still small to get enough result for genomics. The second one is the microbiome, right? Nothing new here. At the end of the day, methane is formed exclusively by methanogens in the rumen. We have been working in this triangle in different approaches. This triangle is beautiful, but it's hard to work with because some traits like microbiome could be a response variable for the host genome, but at the same time could be a predictor or independent variable for another, like methane emissions. So we have been working with mixed models, structural equation models, Bayesian nets. So I will show you some result. So in terms of microbiome collection, what we are doing is, of course, we are sampling the rumen, but Troy is right. Rumen collection is a pain in the neck. So we are doing rumen collection only on our research farms and only in the extremes animals. At the same time that we do rumen collection, we do buccal swab. We want to see the relationship with oral microbiome and rumen microbiome. I'm not very convinced, Troy. I love fecal microbiome. We are sampling every cow in our data set with fecal microbiome. It's high throughput, easy to collect. I will show you some result. Here I have methane, milk energy, body weight, and we perform 16S RNA-seq. 700 cows from 5 farms. Here is an analysis that is called enterosignatures. You basically do a cluster analysis where you try to reduce the dimensionality of the data. I sort the cows from low to high here. So I have 700 bars here, 700 cows. It's easy to see that the low methane cows, they have a lot of yellow, and the high methane cows has very few yellow, and the high methane cows have a lot of green, and the low methane cows have very few green. That means cows with divergent methane emissions, they have different fecal microbiome profiles. That means we can use the fecal microbiome to predict methane emissions. Now, the next results are even cooler. So we calculate the heritability of each microbial trait that we measure as amplicon sequence variants, right? We have 1,074. As you can see here, roughly 60% of the fecal microbiome has a heritability larger than 5%. So roughly 60% of the fecal microbiome is somehow under control the cow. The cow controls partially the abundance of the microbes in the gut. This one is fantastic. We target the most heritable ASVs, and we calculate the genetic correlation between methane and those ASVs, and you can see that there are some microbial traits that are not only highly heritable, but also highly genetically correlated with methane emissions. And here comes the geneticist, right? It's an indirect trait. In order to use as a correlated response, it should be heritable and highly correlated with your breeding goals. So we are very excited with this result. Do I have a few minutes for feed efficiency? I do. Feed efficiency. We do select for feed efficiency in this country. We have two traits: residual feed intake and feed safe. It's fair to say that the University of Wisconsin-Madison is the major contributor of feed intake data to the national evaluation without any discussion. We have been using different technologies to measure feed intake for the last 15, 16 years, okay? Feed efficiency is a major breeding goal, right? Feed represents 55, 60% of total production cost in the farm. So improving feed efficiency has multiple benefits, including reducing the production cost and improving the environmental sustainability. Residual feed intake is the most popular index to measure feed efficiency, but we need to recognize that phenotyping residual feed intake, where you need to have intake data, is expensive, is labor intensive, and is limited to research facilities. Now, thinking more in biology, RFI probably does not fully reflect metabolic efficiency and does not fully account for energy partitioning, what the cow needs for maintenance versus for production. So how can else we quantify efficiency? I'm back in my beautiful diagram of flow of energy in a dairy cow. So one way to do it is to actually measure heat production that actually account for heat increment and maintenance. So now the question, how we quantify heat production? Well, one way is to put cows inside a respiration chamber, right? And use an equation that has 60 years, the Brouwer equation that combines 3 gases and nitrogen to compute heat production. Another way to do it, probably more scalable, is to use the heart rate oxygen pulse equation that was developed by Brush almost 20 years ago that combines heartbeats versus oxygen pulse times a constant. You agree with me, it's probably more scalable, but still, how can I deploy this at the national level? So what if we use the Brouwer equation with a green feed, ignoring actually nitrogen? And you know what? We did that trial. So we set a trial where we have 30 Holstein cows. They have 24/7 access to a green feed. But at the same time, we measure heart rate. So this is a beautiful graph. This is a cow, right? You have heart rate across different days. Every time that she visits the green feed, when she's in the green feed, I can also measure oxygen pulse. That is the oxygen consumption per heart rate. So now I have, for the same set of cows, I can calculate heat production using the heart rate oxygen pulse, and I can calculate heat production using the green feed, using an equation that has 60 years old. These are the results. Beautiful. Look at this. If you do a correlation per visit 221, I have heat production based on heart rate, oxygen pulse in the x-axis, heat production based on the green feed in the y-axis. You get a correlation of 0.94. If you do it per cow, I told you, we enrolled 30 cows, you have a correlation of 0.98. So now now I have a protocol, I have an equation that I can deploy to the national level using the green feed data. So let's do it. Let's compare two matrix of feed efficiency. Residual feed intake, where dry matter intake is your response variable, and you adjust dry matter intake for 3 energy sinks, and you get the residual. And now I have heat production. So let's get the residual of the same equation for residual heat production. We did that. This is data of, for that dry matter intake and residual feed intake, we have more than 10,000 cows. For this analysis, for heat production and residual heat production, we have 2,200 cows. So what we can see here? We can see here that dry matter intake, heat production, residual feed efficiency, residual feed intake, and residual heat production, they are heritable and they are repeatable. Residual heat production is more heritable and more repeatable than RFI. Great news. What about genetic correlations? We have the genetic correlation between dry matter intake and HP is very high, 0.80. But this is a beautiful result. The genetic correlation between these two, let's say, alternative ways to measure dairy cow feed efficiency is 0.50. That means these traits are correlated, but these indices are measuring different underlying biology. Some final remarks. You are well aware that there is a growing public and consumer scrutiny over farming in general, about animal welfare, environmental impact, and pharmacological interventions. Genetic selection is a critical tool to improve dairy sustainability. In this context, we should remember that in the genomics era, phenotype is king. This is a statement from a Scottish researcher. That's why the mention of the king, but basically means even in the genomics era, have phenotype it's extremely important. Especially when we think about methane emissions, any mitigation strategy that we plan to develop and implement, that strategy should meet farmer needs and consumer demands. It's mandatory. Farmers need cheap, easy to implement strategies. Consumer demands for high quality food from healthy, happy cows. I will finish with 2 questions that I don't have the answers yet. What's the economic value of reducing methane emissions? And based on my last result, how should we measure dairy cow feed efficiency? We are working on this, and we discussed yesterday in the panel. For dairy cow feed efficiency, probably in the near future, the way to measure efficiency will be actually through an index that will combine residual feed intake and probably residual heat production. With that, I want to thank my team. I always say the same. They do all the work, so they deserve all the recognition. I'm just the cheerleader of the group. I want to thank the collaborators. This is an effort that involves 5 public land-grant universities, including the University of Wisconsin-Madison, Iowa State, Michigan State, University of Florida, and the University of California, Davis. We work together with the USDA and the Council on Dairy Cattle Breeding. I want to thank the data providers, but especially the money providers. With that, thanks again for your attention, and I open for questions now.